We would like to welcome each one and every one of you tonight who are joining via Facebook Live and via YouTube Live as we start our online Bible study session tonight. We would like to encourage everyone to share our live streaming link. And to those who are joining via Facebook, we would like to encourage to host that you may host a watch party so that you, your family, and your friends might be blessed of tonight's program. Also ready your Kahoot app or kindly visit kahoot.it because in a few minutes we will be having a online quiz regarding creation. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, we are about to enter into a fascinating study and discovery. So grab a pen and a piece of paper and put your thinking caps on. This will be a ride. To officially start our program, shall we call on Brother Chester John Fabula to lead us on our opening prayer?
Let us pray. Our most gracious and kind, loving Heavenly Father, Lord, I'd like to thank you and praise you, Father, for this opportunity for another Bible study this month. And I praise you, Father, for bringing your precious children here again to study thy word. And as we officially start our program, Father, may your presence be with us. And may you guide all the participants, especially our speaker, Dr. Timothy Standish. And may you give us knowledge and wisdom, and so that we may understand the message well, and may the message speaks in our heart, Father. This is all I pray, Father. Forgive us in for all the iniquities that we've done against thee. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Hi everyone. I am not here to facilitate the book raffle. Instead, we will be having the Kahoot quiz. All right. So, just go to your website, or if you have an application, or if you're in the website, you can just type in there kahoot.it and type there the code that you're now seeing on the screen. So it is 916 7483. Yeah, 916 7483. Okay. So please go to your website now and type the code that you can see on the screen. So we've prepared 15 set of questions, which is a combination of practical and scientific questions. All right. So this will be exciting. I hope you guys are excited. So top three will receive a copy of this book uh, entitled Creation Mystery by Leon Brand. Okay, a conversation on origins. Are you there? Okay. Oh, we're waiting for players. No one's joining. Come on, guys. Type the code 9167483. You can go to the website kahoot.it and type the code 9167483. I think it's better if you have two devices because you will be seeing on the screen the questions, and on the other device you will be choosing the answers among the colored tiles that you will be seeing in your phones. Okay, but no one's joining right now. We're waiting for the players. Where are you? The book is waiting. Where are you guys? Come on, join now. Kahoot.it and type your code 9167483. We're waiting for players. Okay, we have one player now. Where are the others? We'll wait for you in a few minutes. Okay, please go to your website and type the code. Uh, Go to kahoot.it and type the code 9167483. Come on, invite your friends to join with us. Go to kahoot.it and type the code 916-7483. Okay, so since we have right now just two players, we will just move on to the next part of the program. We will continue the quiz after the Bible study, the main study. Okay, so please invite your friends because the question awaits you and the book awaits you as well. So thank you.
For the beauty of the earth, for the beauty of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies. Lord of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the beauty of each hour of the day and of the night, hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light, Lord of all, to thee we raise these our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of human love, brother, sister, parent, child, friends on earth and friends above, our own gentle thoughts and might, Lord of all, to thee we raise these our hymn of grateful praise.
So welcome once again to our online Bible study session. My part is to introduce to you our guest speaker and guest lecturer this evening. Dr. Timothy Standish is the managing editor and lead editor of By Design Biology, the scientific study of life, a new textbook for high school biology classes published by Kindle Hand Publishing Company. Dr. Standish completed a BS degree in zoology with a chemistry minor and a MS degree in biology while studying bronchiopods at Andrews University in Michigan. At George Mason University, he was awarded a PhD in environmental biology and public policy based on his research into molecular techniques useful for identification and classification of nematode worms. He has taught on 4 continents and authored publications covering topics ranging from molecular basis of behavior in crickets to turtle conservation, intelligent design, and public policy. In addition, he published many academic and popular articles dealing with faith and science. Production of films exploring the beautiful and elegant design evident in living things is another area in which he has been active. And perhaps you have seen him in 3ABN, ASI, and some sessions in the General Conference. Brothers and sisters, gentlemen and ladies, Dr. Standish holds the rank of senior scientist at Geoscience Research Institute in Loma Linda, California. Our guest speaker this evening, no other than Dr. Timothy Standish.
Well, thank you very much, Arnold. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I should tell you that one of those continents that I have taught on, and I've done so on a regular basis, is Asia. And I have regularly taught a class there in the Philippines at IAS. So you are in a familiar part of the world to me. I wish I was there with you in person. At the moment, in fact, I also grew up in Malaysia. We lived in Thailand while I was quite young. And I went to school in Singapore as well. So Southeast Asia, that's where I grew up. And it's a part of the world that I love. I still think of it as home. Well, I am going to share my screen with you. And we are going to launch into a presentation that I have put together, and we will go from there. I apologize that you're going to have to see my entire screen there for just a moment, but this is the slide that I want to start with, because I'm hoping that most of you are well aware that not this previous Sabbath, but the Sabbath before was Creation Sabbath. This is that specially designated Sabbath to remember that God is our creator and our redeemer. And you can see here various places, churches or schools and so on, that have registered that they're having events. It's always thrilling for me to see all of these institutions showing up in the Philippines that go to our website, which is creationsabbath.net, and let us know that they're doing something for Creation Sabbath. As I tell people, the week after Creation Sabbath, it's not too late to start planning for next year. But it's the whole point of Creation Sabbath is to joyfully worship our Creator and Redeemer. So if anybody is intimidated by this topic or anything, you've got it wrong. And we're going to go through some interesting things about creation. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the kind of research that I'm doing right now, which I think may interest you. But I also want to draw your attention to a very interesting paper that came out recently. And this all does work together. Before we do that, let's think about what the Bible tells us about the creation and the God whom we worship. This is the Apostle Paul writing to the Christians in Rome. And he said, "For since the creation of the world, this is God's, invisible attributes are clearly seen." That seems like it's a little bit backwards, doesn't it? How can something be invisible and yet clearly seen? But we'll see here what he's talking about. Being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So think about somebody whom you admire, let's say somebody who's very artistic. When you look at their art, the thing that they have created, it tells you something about them, something about the brilliance in their mind, something about the skill that they have in working with the paint or whatever it is. I mean, maybe they're a sculptor and they're working with wood, or they're working with um, uh, some kind of stone, or maybe they make other kinds of things. But that creativity, that skill, their abilities are evident in what they've made. So even if you're not looking at the person directly, from what they've made, you can know certain things about them. Obviously, not everything. So there's a very good reason why God gave us two books, not just one. He gave us his word, the Bible, and he gave us his works. And viewed through the worldview that the Bible opens up to us, viewed with a knowledge of the Creator whom it introduces to us, all sorts of interesting things come out of this creation that we're part of. I want to talk also a little bit about Charles Darwin, and that may seem like an unusual choice of topics for a talk about creation, but you'll see where I'm going here in just a moment. You'll remember that Charles Darwin went on a voyage around the world as a young man, a voyage on a boat called the Beagle. And they started out, well, there's the equator there. They started out in England. They went to South America, and they went down the coast of South America. They visited the Falkland Islands. They went up the west coast of South America, so up the coast of Chile and so on, and then out to the Galapagos Islands. And this is what I'm going to focus on a little bit in this presentation. These islands are a little bit like the Philippines. They're an archipelago. And then, of course, they eventually went back to the United Kingdom on this boat. And he wrote a book about what he had found there. In that book, called The Voyage of the Beagle, he wrote, "The object of the expedition was to complete the survey of Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, to survey the shores of Chile, Peru, and some other places, Pacific." I'm afraid I can't see my entire quotation here. It's covered up by something. But to visit certain islands, I believe it is in the Pacific, and to carry a chain of chronometrical measurements around the world. You'll remember that with navigation back then, they had difficulties. They could tell their latitude, but not their longitude. So it was the English, the British, who figured out how to measure that latitude. And that involved the creation of clocks that could measure time, these chronometers that could measure time very accurately. And by using those, they could tell exactly where they were on the surface of the earth. That's why the English became masters of the oceans. There were obviously many other powers involved in navigating around. Spain, obviously, had found and influenced the Philippines very much. But it was the English who were sort of very obsessed with knowing exactly where they were. And so the Voyage of the Beagle had to do with that. It also had to do with looking at what was there. What sorts of resources were there in different parts of the world? What kinds of people? Could they trade with them? Could they take those resources and use them in industry or in some other trading endeavor? So he was sort of part of that big picture of things. And he wrote in his book, The Origin of Species, this about the Galapagos Islands. The Galapagos archipelago, situated under the equator, lies at a distance between 500 and 600 miles from the shores of South America. Here, almost every product of the land and of the water bears the unmistakable stamp of the American continent. And this is really an argument that he was using for his theory of evolution. He said, if you look at these organisms, they look like those that are found in South America, but they're different. So therefore, they must have come from South America and then changed in some way. And he proposed this mechanism of change called natural selection. Of course, there's a flip side to this argument, and that is that if these organisms were actually changing in the way that he extrapolated they were changing, then they would be far more different than what you find there. In other words, you wouldn't be able to recognize the birds as being birds that came from South America, just as you can recognize the birds in the Philippines as those that came from Asia, for example. Those birds, they didn't evolve into something completely different from birds. They're ever so slightly different birds. And as a consequence of that, we can see that they are South American birds, in fact. So you could argue that what the organisms in the Galapagos Islands and on other remote islands, what they show is that God created organisms highly adaptable, so they can quickly adapt to changing situations in their environment, but they cannot adapt forever. And so they remain that basic kind of organism. Well, when you go to the Galapagos Islands, you find lots of references to Charles Darwin and his visit there. There are lots of statues of him. This one here, he looks kind of august. This one, I don't know. I think they were probably trying to honor him, but I'm not sure how successful they really were. Here's another one. This one, he looks like kind of, I don't know, jolly Santa Claus or something. And perched on his head is one of the Galapagos mockingbirds. These were one of the animals that he made a very big deal about because they obviously came from South America. And that then shows you the crux of this argument that he was presenting. Look, they've changed a little bit here in the Galapagos Islands, but they're also still the same. They don't adapt forever, which was the claim that he made. If you go to the Galapagos Islands and you visit the main town there, Porto Aurora, there's this road there that goes down to the Charles Darwin Research Center. And so to get there, you pass this building. This is the Origins Museum of Nature. And this is something that was recently set up by the South American Division. I'm really excited about it. They also have a church there and a school, a very active campus. And in that Origins Museum of Nature, what they offer is a museum that anybody can come in and visit. I was there a couple of months ago, and it's very impressive. People just come in. They're looking for something to do in the Galapagos Islands, and this gives us an opportunity to present a different view to visitors and also to local people there of the way nature works and the God who created all things. A very different view than that evolutionary view that Charles Darwin presented. Here I am with Dr. Mara Brandeo. She runs this center at the moment, and a very, very impressive woman. She's certainly a lot better at languages than I am. She speaks Portuguese, Spanish, and English all very well. And so that makes her a very good person there to be greeting people and sharing the biblical worldview with visitors. Here are some of the research group whom I work with there from Loma Linda University. And this is going onto an island there called South Plaza. You can see it's very beautiful, a very beautiful place indeed. Here we are working on one of the marine iguanas there. It's a lot of work. It looks like we're all just standing around, doesn't it? These marine iguanas are quite incredible creatures. Charles Darwin noticed them when he was there. He wrote this: "The black lava rocks on the beach are frequented by large, most disgusting, clumsy lizards." He didn't like them, but these are the organisms that I'm studying at the moment. They look kind of like dragons, don't they? And they are quite unique. There are two organisms in the world that are land-dwelling vertebrates, but they live primarily on eating seaweed. One of them is a specific breed of sheep in Scotland, on one Scottish island, and these marine iguanas. They are quite remarkable creatures. I think they're quite beautiful. You know, when you work with them and you hold them, you can see that this intelligence in their eyes. It's quite incredible. You know, we tend to forget how amazing other organisms are. Look at this creature. He almost looks like he's smiling. And oh, here's another remarkable thing about them. They have an eye on the top of their head, an extra eye. There are other reptiles that have this feature, not 100% of them, but that structure that you see there in the middle of the head, the sort of white structure, that is an extra eye. It seems to see things in a different way than its regular eyes, but it certainly detects light and dark and does all sorts of things. They're a bit of a mystery, an amazing and fun mystery. Well, these creatures, they are plentiful in many areas, and they're not particularly concerned about human beings. So you can be walking down the sidewalk there and find them just splayed out on the sidewalk. Here's another kind of iguana that you find there. These are land iguanas, and you can see they're quite different. They're differently colored. Their bodies are quite a different shape, and they have a different diet as well. Charles Darwin wrote about these. He said, "We have another large reptile in great numbers. It's a great lizard, in structure closely allied to those imps of darkness." So he's calling the marine iguanas little devils, imps of darkness here, which frequent the seashore. They have a ridge and spines along the back, are colored an orange yellow, with the hinder part of back brick red. So he was actually talking about a slightly different species on a different island here. This one here obviously isn't red in its hind regions. They're hideous animals, but are considered good food. This day 40 were collected. I want you to think about his attitude towards these creatures. Some people believe a myth that Charles Darwin went to the Galapagos Islands with, as a young Christian man, and that he was compelled by the evidence that he saw there to abandon his belief in God and become a materialist. That's not true. We now have, anybody can have access to his notebooks and things, and we can see that he was a fairly committed materialist from the time he kind of dropped out of medical school when he was going to the University of Edinburgh, or the medical school in Edinburgh. That kind of interests me because my father didn't drop out there. He was a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians in Edinburgh. And but anyway, the medicine wasn't for Charles Darwin, and that's why he went down to Cambridge University to study, of all things, theology. But before he even went down there, he was a committed materialist. That's indisputable at this particular point. So when, as a young man, he went on the Beagle and they sailed around the world, that materialistic view was how he was looking at things. And as a consequence of that, he was not seeing the beauty and the interest that these organisms represent. However, I'd add one other thing. While he would have argued that these iguanas are obvious and dramatic examples of evolution, in reality, they are not. They are actually beautiful examples of adaptation. They are obviously iguanas. Iguanas are a common kind of lizard that just somehow seems to get from island to island. That's why you find many of them in the Caribbean, for example. They just seem to have an ability to do it. I don't know how they got out there to the Galapagos Islands, but it turns out that these land iguanas in the wild will occasionally interbreed with the marine iguanas. So they are the same, they remain the same kind of organism, and they produce offspring when they interbreed. They have significant differences between them. That shows, in my view, how rapidly and elegantly organisms have been equipped to adapt to these new environments that they find themselves in. It's actually a beautiful example of design. Here I am with some of them out there. They you can get big ones and small ones. There were some reasonably sized ones out here. And when you handle them, yeah, sometimes there's blood. They're actually quite passive, this particular species of iguana, but they're quite powerful creatures. And if they get you with the claws on their back legs or something, or if they bite you, it can be, not a super serious injury, although one guy whom I was not working with, did manage to get a finger bitten off by one of these iguanas. So you do need to be careful, and it's smart to wear gloves. Here you can see why they're called marine iguanas, because they swim in the ocean as they go out every day, and they dive down and they eat seaweed. It's amazing. And there are lots of other organisms there. These white-tipped sharks, for some reason or other, they like to come in and just rest in this particular area. Amazing. Kind of fun stuff. This is Dr. Brandeo, and she was swimming out there. I don't think she was aware that she was swimming with the marine iguanas, but I quickly got this picture of her when she was doing that. So Sir Isaac Newton asked a question about the bodies of animals, like marine iguanas or human beings or any other creature. He said, how came the bodies of animals to be contrived with so much art? And for what ends were there several parts? Was the eye contrived without skill in optics, and the ear without knowledge of sounds? And these are questions that all worldviews actually seek to provide answers with. The answer that evolutionary materialistic worldview that Charles Darwin championed, that particular worldview answers these questions with yes. The nature had no skill in optics, but natural selection just somehow or other caused eyes to come to be, and ears, and so on. I want to draw your attention to a paper that was published in April of this year. And it's a very technical paper. Those of you who are interested, I give the URL there, and you can go and look it up yourselves if you're kind of science oriented. But I'm going to explain to you what this paper is talking about, because it relates to this issue of what is a reasonable cause for what we observe in ourselves and in marine iguanas and in all other vertebrates. And to illustrate this Darwinian worldview, I'm going to use a couple of quotations from somebody named Richard Dawkins, Clinton Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins was a very famous evangelist for atheism and a huge supporter of Darwinism. He wrote in a book called The Blind Watchmaker, suppose I tell you that the eye's photocells are pointing backwards, away from the scene being looked at. So these are the light-sensitive cells at the back of the eye in the retina, and the wires connecting the photocells to the brain run over the surface of the retina. So he's talking here about the nerves running over the surface. So the light rays have to pass through a carpet of massed wires before they hit the photocells. That doesn't make sense, and it gets even worse. So let's look at what he's talking about here. Here's a human eye, or it could be an elephant's eye, or it could be a bird's eye. All vertebrates have the same basic design for their eye. So here are the light-sensitive cells in our retina. And if you look at somebody's face, light reflected from that face is focused by the lens in your eye onto these light-sensitive cells. They react to that light and they send a signal to the nerves. And here is the problem as Richard Dawkins sees it. Those nerves run in front of the light-sensitive cells, and then they have to go through the light-sensitive cells to take the signal back to your brain. Let's zoom in on just a little bit of the retina here and take a look at how things are arranged. So here are these light-detecting cells, and the problem is that they are very metabolically active. That means that they use a lot of energy. So you just sitting here looking at this presentation, if you're not exercising or anything else, I've seen estimates as high as a quarter of the energy that you're using in your body right now would be just your eyes. It's a lot of energy that's being used. And that energy comes from sugar that is oxidized with oxygen. So where do we get sugar and oxygen from? That's delivered to the eyes through the blood. So I don't know if you've ever tried this. I don't necessarily recommend it. I have when I've injured myself. But if you've ever tried looking through blood, you've probably noticed it's pretty opaque. Therefore, it's absolutely necessary that that blood go behind the light-sensitive cells. That means there is actually only one place where the nerves can go, and that's in front of them. And this is the design that Richard Dawkins is criticizing, but you'll notice that he doesn't suggest a better design, because this is the way at least our kind of eye needs to be designed. This is why he has such fantastic eyes. There are other retina designs that you see in some invertebrates. They are well suited to the needs of those organisms. But for vertebrates, like human beings, this design is pretty much the only way to go, even though Richard Dawkins doesn't like it. So what's the problem with this as he sees it? When light comes in, it gets dissipated as it goes through the nerve cells. And he figures that, somebody like God should have been able to come up with a better design than that. He's not satisfied with it. He goes on and he says this: one consequence of the photocells pointing backwards is that the wires that carry their data somehow have to pass through the retina and back to the brain. What they do in the vertebrate eye is all converge on a particular hole in the retina where they dive through it. The hole filled with nerves is called the blind spot. It's not just bad design, it's the design of a complete idiot. So I've already shown you why the design is this way, but why is Richard Dawkins so dismissive, so negative about it? It's because he believes that his whole body, and everything else is the result of a process that had no intelligence involved in it at all. It had an IQ of 0. That's what he believes. And as a consequence of that, he interprets everything he sees within that framework, which must be pretty awful for a biologist. But anyway, let's look at what he's talking about here. There's that optic nerve, and there's that blind spot. Why is this um, uh, allowed to be? Well, it's the only way it can be. But you know what? When an engineer is doing things, they recognize issues like this, and they generally come up with a solution. Intelligent engineers do this. It turns out that your right and your left eye, they are both they both have blind spots, but they're in different locations. And as a consequence of that, what you're seeing with your right eye is used to fill in the blind spot in your left eye, and vice versa. And as a consequence of that, we actually have nearly perfect 180 degree vision in front of us. There are no gaps in our vision. Our brain is putting it all together, so we're not even aware that we have a blind spot. So here's the human retina. And what about that problem that Dawkins doesn't like with the nerve cells dissipating the light that passes through them? Actually, there is an engineered solution to that as well, and this was fairly recently discovered. There's a whole class of cells called glial cells that are associated normally with nerves. And it turns out that in the retina, there are these specialized glial cells that go through that maze of nerves, and they act like fiber optics. They're very transparent. And as a consequence of that, the light that hits the surface of the retina, where all those nerves are, is transmitted through by these glial cells. It's pretty amazing stuff. Absolutely incredible. And when you think about it, as you watch this presentation, your eyes are doing this continually. It's just all the time. This is what's happening. It's no wonder that a fair amount of energy is used, by the way, in doing this. I don't know, when I look at this, I see extraordinarily good design. But there's another problem that Dawkins and others have had with the arrangement of things in the eye that they see as bad design, therefore evidence that God had nothing to do with it. And you'll actually probably have already thought of this, but just because something's badly designed does not mean that it wasn't designed at all. So that's a whole other logical fallacy in all of this. But it turns out that God is actually, he declared his creation very good, and he had good reason to do that. Let's zoom in on some of these light-sensitive cells. There are several different kinds of light-sensitive cell, but one of them is called a cone cell. And that one I want to take a look at because that's the subject of that paper that I told you about there a few slides ago. Up here at the top of these light-sensitive cells, you have the interface with the neurons, the nerves. So this is where the signal is being sent to those nerves that take it back to your brain. Here in the middle is the part of the cell where you have all of the normal cell activities going on. This is where the energy is being generated with the sugar and oxygen and other things. And down here at the bottom in these outer segments, that's where there are pigments that actually absorb the light and generate that signal. So there are a lot of mitochondria in there. Those mitochondria are important because they're what generate the energy inside cells. So the light comes in and the signal goes back. And we want to look at just one question here. how is light efficiently transmitted to the light-absorbing pigments at the back of cone cells? How does that happen? Because, again, some people would say this is a backwards design. And it turns out this paper published this year helps us understand how this actually works. Remember, there are all of these mitochondria there, and what we would expect is that as light comes in, it starts trying to go through the cell body, it'll be reflected and refracted off all of those organelles in there, and it'll go scattering off all over the place in the eye, which would be a very bad thing. You wouldn't be able to see sharp images at all. So there must be a solution, because we see very clearly, most of us. And that solution is actually in these mitochondria. The mitochondria are arranged into a specialized structure that acts like a micro lens, a microscopic lens in there. And this is how things work. As light comes in, yes, it begins to spread out in the cell body, but it is taken by this tiny lens formed by the mitochondria and bent back in and focused down into the outer segment where there are these pigments that are absorbing that light. And then there's an amazing chain of biochemical events that result in a signal being sent back up. But can you see how amazing this is? This creates a system that is so efficient that it is utilizing more than 90% of the light that hits your eye. It's unmatched by anything that humans have ever made. It's absolutely jaw-dropping. And it contains, where Darwinists saw nothing but bad design and stopped looking, unfortunately, because of that, what it actually has is multiple examples of beautiful, elegant design that testify to the power and wisdom, I would say also, of our Creator, just as the Apostle Paul says. And yet, in the face of this, people are blinded to the evidence that's right in front of them. Here is another quotation from this year by somebody saying, "Consider eyes, organs so complex they fool some into thinking they must have been designed by a creator." When you look at statements like this, it's reasonable to ask who the fool is. Now, I don't like to mock other people. I don't think that's necessary. But really, who is the fool? When you've got evidence like what we see in the eye right in front of us. Let's talk about some implications of this. This is not the first and will probably not be the last case where proofs of Darwinism become progressively less compelling as new data accrue. I've actually already seen this happen multiple times in my life. These unanswerable arguments by Darwinists just sort of fall into pieces. And so it's a great time to be alive and to be a biologist and a believer in the Creator God. Because Darwinism is as much a religion as Catholicism, Hinduism, or animism, believers will commonly simply continue to interpret the evidence within their old worldview, perhaps not even seeing how clearly misplaced their beliefs actually are. This certainly doesn't mean that anyone has all the answers, especially not Christians. Everyone lives by faith. Everyone. Okay? Scientists live by faith too. Just like, I don't know, nuns live by faith or we live by faith. But the faith of Christians does seem to have been richly rewarded. So yes, when I started out as a biologist, I didn't have great answers to everything that Richard Dawkins was saying. However, I'm glad that I lived by faith for a little while. Now, this seems like a random thing that I'm showing you here, but it does have to do with my trip to the Galapagos Islands a couple of months ago. I was walking through the airport, and what I saw was something I wasn't expecting. And that's one of these shops there with, I don't know whether you can see what these books are that are being sold in front of this store. Choice books indeed. They're Bibles and Bible books for children and so on. Somebody made this happen, and I'm really impressed by it. I wish it was me. What a great way of sharing our faith. Why doesn't every bookstore in every airport have Bible books for sale like this? This is a place where people still buy books to read on the plane. They're looking for things for their children to do on the plane. Wow, what absolute genius. I see this as being like that Origins Museum of Nature that we've built and developed there and continue to develop in the in the Galapagos Islands. Not only is it a witness to the public, it also serves as a base for us to do research on things. So it's a very powerful thing. But so is this. This is incredible. So back to the Galapagos Islands. Once I got there, there are so many beautiful things that I see there. So many beautiful things. I love the fact that the animals are not afraid of human beings. This particular sea lion, I was working all around him. He didn't mind at all. He was up there on his throne while the waters raged below him, and I worked around him, and he was just as happy and content as could be. Yes, I was there. It was wonderful. I could have walked up to him and given him a pat like a dog if I wanted to. That's illegal to do, and he might not have enjoyed that so much. I might have gotten a nip out of it. I don't know. But it was still wonderful. To me, being there in the Galapagos Islands it's like a foretaste of heaven. And yet this is what Charles Darwin wrote. He said, the country was compared to what we might imagine the cultivated parts of the infernal regions to be. He was saying, these islands, they're like hell. How awful to live your life seeing the world like that. But he writes about this also in his autobiography at the end of his life. He'd lost the ability to see beauty and to get joy out of beautiful things, including nature itself. How sad. But that's what that worldview does. This is why we as Christians are called to share a different worldview. Yeah, in the town of Porto Ayora, these sea lions, they're lying around everywhere. I think of them as, well, I mean, they're just everywhere. It's wonderful. Yes, I was tempted to join them myself. They do a lot of sleeping. Anyway, this particular one caught my attention. Look at him. This is at a hotel there. And he was lying there on one of the chaise lounges. After a while, he got up and took a swim around their swimming pool. Then he got out, and this was truly amazing. There was a lady sitting, in fact, it's the lady that you see there behind on the other chaise lounge. She was sitting on this one that you see the sea lion on right now. And he came up to her. He wanted that one, and he actually pushed her off it. Just an amazing thing. It was, I don't know, she didn't mind moving to another one, but he wanted that one. But how nice to be able to interact with these wild animals in that way. That is what heaven's going to be like for me. This is years ago when I was in the Galapagos Islands on another trip. And this juvenile sea lion, he was looking at me, and then he came over, and look at this. He smelt my leg like a dog might. What an amazing thing. What an incredible experience that was. Um, every day in heaven's going to be like that for me. That's and by the way, I was thrilled to see earlier that that you used Ecclesiastes 3:11. Um, I like the hint in there that we're never going to know the end from the beginning. When we go to heaven, it's not like we're going to know everything. There, our God is infinite. He created a universe that has infinite, endlessly interesting things to discover it in it. And each one of those things is a thrilling revelation of something about him. Oh, look at this. I mean, where else in the world can you just walk up to these creatures with their babies like this? I don't know whether you can see in this picture this mother and her baby beside her just to the left there. I was there when she gave birth. It was beautiful. It was a miracle. It was gorgeous. Charles Darwin, all he saw was struggle and death in the world and suffering. And yes, those things exist. But God created something very good. He made everything beautiful in its time. Yes, it's marred by sin, but the beauty that's there to discover, the beauty that we can see as long as we're not blinded by our worldview to seeing that beauty. This is what God says. Thus says God the Lord, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread forth the earth and that which comes from it, who gives breath to the people on it and spirit to those who walk on it. I, the Lord, have called you. That's you, that's me, called you in righteousness and will hold your hand. So he's with us. I will keep you and give you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the Gentiles, to open blind eyes. These philosophies that are out there, these religions out there that blind people to seeing the beauty in the world, that blind them to the wonderful creator and redeemer whom we worship. God is going to be with us as we seek to share a knowledge of him with the world. And by doing that, yes, we'll bring them out of, we're releasing prisoners from prison. And we're releasing those who sit in darkness from the prison house. What a wonderful mission we Christians have in life. So I want to remind you that next year, Creation Sabbath will be on October 22. That's a very difficult day, or at least date, for Adventists to forget. I hope that the churches that you're involved with will plan something wonderful for Creation Sabbath. I hope that it will not be just something for you, but that you'll do something that you can share with your entire community, because that is what God has called us to do. That's what our Creator gives us the power to do in the communities around us. If you're looking for other resources in this area, I would suggest these two websites, grista.org, that is the URL for the Geoscience Research Institute, where I work, and also the John1010project.com. The John 1010 Project is a project that I've been working with other Christians, not just Adventists. Okay, well, thank you so much for your attention. I believe I just stopped sharing. So let's see here. Yes, indeed. And that we can have some question and answer time now. Oh, and I see there are an awful lot of comments in here.
Amen. Thank you so much, Dr. Standish, for that fascinating discourse on creation. So right now we would like to start with a few questions. So, Dr. Standish, someone would like to ask, does religion interfere with an honest study of science? Perhaps he is asking, are we trying to bring a bias in a study of science when we are a person of faith? Are we bringing a bias into our study?
First of all, everybody has a religion. Okay. And so somebody who's an atheist is just as religious as you. They have just as much a theology as you do. And so um, escaping religion, there is no such thing as no religion. Religion is necessary, or what I would call metaphysics is necessary for doing science in the first place. Um, consider, for example, well, let's go with a Darwinian view. Um, Imagine that you believe that eyes have evolved. Well, why have they evolved? There's only one reason, and that is that they make you more fit, which ultimately means you have more babies that go into the next generation. So that's the only reason that you have eyes. Based on that, why would you believe that your eyes are necessarily giving you an accurate picture of the reality around you? All they're doing is making you have more babies. There's no other reason for your eyes, or your ears, or your sense of touch, or all of these things that that we use as science. We call this empirical data. That information that we take in through our senses is the foundation of science, and there is no way of scientifically proving, let's say, by the way, scientific proof is not something that really is a reality, but scientifically demonstrating that what we take in through our senses is a reflection of reality at all. We get that from Christianity. It's a Christian belief that, and that's why, one of the reasons why modern science developed in a Christian culture. It's a specific kind of Christian culture, but it's a Christian culture that believes that God gave us our senses and we are to use them to learn of Him. So when the Bible says the heavens declare the glory of God, or taste and see that the Lord is good, it means use your senses and use your mind to understand what is around you. On the other hand, think of Hindus. Hindus are at least supposed to believe that everything is an illusion. What you've taken through your senses is purely an illusion. It's not an accurate representation of reality. And there are many other things. Why would you believe that the laws of nature are going to be the same tomorrow as they are today, or that they were the same 1,000 years ago? There is a Christian reason for doing that, and that is that God created and sustains all things. That's clearly taught in Scripture. And that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So therefore, that tells us there are laws out there in nature that can be discovered, and they're going to be useful because that information is going to be useful because they're not going to change as we go forward in time. And we can use them then to understand at least something about the past. So having something like Christian beliefs is absolutely necessary for doing science. What atheism does is it kind of kludges off Christianity. It without justification just sort of takes those those things and says, yes, well, it's obviously true. But it isn't obviously true. It certainly isn't obviously true to everyone, and certainly not a billion Hindus. And of course, Buddhists would see things in a different way as well. So there's, you can't not be religious, if you want to put it that way, with these things. What you can do is you can recognize your biases. And if you're interested in this question, there are a number of videos that I would recommend taking a look at on our website. One of them is the one that I just put up here for Creation Sabbath, about Leonard Brand. So if you go to grisda.org, choose videos, and then choose, and or if you go to creationsabbath.net, you can also find it there. It's free to stream. But there, Leonard Brand, the book that you're interested in, there's this video that I just produced about him, and you'll see that he is also talking about these things in quite a profound way.
Thank you, Dr. Standish. Here's another question sent in. Dr. Standish, does dinosaurs exist? And is it a proof of evolution?
It's my belief, certainly, that dinosaurs existed in the past. There's abundant evidence for it. My colleague Raul Esperante is currently studying one of the largest and most spectacular dinosaur trackway sites that's ever been discovered. It's absolutely incredible. And Dr. Arthur Chadwick, who I also recently released a film about, but there's lots of information about him on the internet. Studies one of the most spectacular dinosaur bone beds. So Adventist scientists have been studying these things extensively for many years. Yes, they existed. There are a lot of misconceptions that people have about dinosaurs. You think of them as being, nothing but these monstrous, vicious, meat-eating creatures. In reality, dinosaurs were certainly not the largest animals that have ever existed. Those exist today, at least that we know of, and that would be blue whales. So whales are significantly bigger, but they live in the ocean. So dinosaurs, the very largest dinosaurs, they are the largest land animals that we know of. To be that big requires incredible design. I don't know whether you've ever studied or thought about things like giraffes, and all of the design that had to go into allowing giraffes to be that tall. It's not a trivial thing at all. But actually, most dinosaurs were normally sized creatures, maybe the size of a chicken to the size of a cow, that sort of size. So they and many of them were vegetarian, grazing kind of creatures. So I think that if we saw them, most dinosaurs, look, if I saw T-Rex coming my way, I'd be running too. But that is not the way most dinosaurs were. That's very clear. They seem to have been well adapted to the environment that they lived in, peaceful creatures. And it's just a tragedy that they're extinct. The reasons that people generally seem to argue against them ever existing has to do with some kind of misconception, that they somehow prove evolution true, which doesn't make logical sense. Or I've also heard people argue that God would never have made creatures so ugly. But remember, we've never seen a dinosaur. I suspect that many of them are quite beautiful creatures. And then some people have a problem with them fitting on the ark. That's really not a major issue. So I don't see a reason as a Seventh day Adventist Christian and a Bible believer not to believe that dinosaurs were real. Certainly, there's abundant evidence that these were real creatures and quite spectacular.
Perhaps another question to follow up on that line of thought, Doctor, is that
Mhm.
how reliable is carbon dating? What are your thoughts about it?
Hmm. It depends on who you talk to. And this is a little bit outside of my area of expertise, so I will try to talk about what I do know. Okay, I have not done carbon dating. I'm not involved in that sort of thing. My colleague Ben Clausen has worked in the carbon 14 lab at the University of California at Irvine, I believe it is. Certainly, when they had the lab in Riverside at the University of California, Riverside. In fact, that lab was run by a gentleman who was an Adventist of a sort. He didn't really share the biblical beliefs, unfortunately, but certainly he was a member of the Loma Linda University Church and let his presence be known. Anyway, he was also editor of Adventist Today, if you're familiar with that publication. Anyway, so I will tell you that as a scientist, I am I tend towards empiricism. So if something works, then it works, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Here's the problem with all radiometric dating that I've observed. When it gives the answers that people expect, they claim that it is a very good and reliable method of dating things. When it gives the answers they don't expect, then they claim that it's not reliable for some reason. With carbon 14, it seems to me that it presents far more problems for people who believe in at least extremely long ages than it does for those of us who believe that the Earth was, well, at least life on Earth and everything was recently created, thousands of years, not millions of years ago. One of the reasons for that is that you find carbon 14 in coal. And it's easily within the measurable ranges. The problem is that carbon 14 actually decays relatively fast, which means that you should find no carbon 14 at all after about 100,000 years. One or two claims have claimed to have gotten a little bit higher than that. But this coal is supposed to be hundreds of millions of years old, or 100 million or 200 million years, in that kind of range. It cannot have carbon 14 in it, according to the sort of standard Darwinian kind of thinking. So under those, in that situation, all of a sudden, the people who claim that carbon dating is absolutely true and reliable start saying, no, it's not true, it's not reliable, and it's not telling us the obvious thing, which is that the coal was formed less than 100,000 years ago. So do you see what I'm saying? There is a guy here in Loma Linda who has done some very interesting experimental work with carbon 14. His name is Dr. Paul Geim. And Dr. Geim has a book that's available on the internet for free. You can take a look at it. I believe it's called Scientific Theology, in which he talks about some interesting ideas about how carbon 14 dating may be working that would explain the patterns that we see in the data.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Standish. Some Christians try to mend or try to join evolution and creation. So, what are your thoughts on theistic evolution? And kindly describe what is theistic evolution about?
Yeah. Theistic evolution is a very hard thing to pin down because, at least in my experience, and I've had plenty with it, as you try to pin down people on it, it's a little bit like trying to pin down a vapor. Somehow or other, it shifts elsewhere, and so I found it quite difficult to have really rational discussions with people who are believers in it. But I'll make a couple of observations about it. First of all, this seems to be something that is um, a kind of failed compromise. Um, to me, it presents the worst of all possible options because it's both unbiblical and unscientific as well. Um, what's commonly postulated is that the core idea is that evolution was God's method of creating. That would be a sort of, I think, a reasonably fair summarization of it. And so what that says then is that God uses struggle, suffering, and death to achieve his purposes. Death is not the enemy. Death is God's plan. And it brings in death before sin entered the world. So theologically, it's fatal, in my opinion, to biblical Christianity. And I don't see the attraction of it other than with a certain class of people, they labor under a kind of delusion that somehow or other embracing this idea will give them respectability in the secular world. It doesn't. Richard Dawkins, for example, mocks them. So I personally feel sorrow for people who've embraced that view. At the same time, I don't want to be too harsh about it. I hope and pray that people who've embraced this, I'd call it a strong delusion, will still be saved through God's grace. But my experience has been that you have teachers, for example, who will embrace this idea and kind of teach it in one way or another in their classes. But my friends who embraced it, they're no longer Christians. They've got their whole lives ahead of them. Why would they embrace something that's obviously ridiculous and not evidence-based, particularly those with a scientific mindset? The bottom line is there will always be tension between scripture and the claims of science. That's inevitable because scripture is unchanging and it's true. It reveals the truth to us. Whereas science is an ongoing, ever-changing process of seeking to understand the world in which we live. So if science perfectly agrees with the Bible today, it won't tomorrow. And if you want to make both methods of finding out about reality, if you want to make them both worthless, then try to mash them together into something like theistic evolution. That's at least my view of it. I find it very unsatisfying on multiple levels. Probably the biggest arguments that I hear for it are actually emotional. I hear people saying this is the only way of keeping our young people in the church. We can't ask them to believe something as ridiculous as God created us all, thousands of years ago. How could we ask? It's asking too much of them and they'll all leave the church. No, that's, again, I tend towards empiricism myself. I've observed what it does. It doesn't save young people. It gently ushers them out of the church and out of their Christian faith.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Standish. Perhaps another question is that is there any scientific evidence or to believe about a recent 6-day literal creation? Or
Yeah,
yeah,
let me split my answer into two parts. The first part I would say is no. Okay, and the reason that I say that is the creation is a miracle, and what science studies is regularities, laws that are unchanging. Um, so when you have miracles occurring, the mechanism behind those is not accessible to science. So that's why I would say no. We're talking about something that's just a different category. It's science is not the method for understanding miracles. Science, however, may tell us that a miracle occurred. And so if we look at it from that angle, we could say, yes, there's actually abundant evidence of that we were created. Um, when you look at the way organisms work, they are not the kind of thing that you can build in an incremental way, which is what evolution requires, particularly at the biochemical and molecular level. These systems are simply not buildable step by step. They must all be there, all in place, all working at once for an organism to be alive. So there is clearly evidence of creation itself. A lot of people get very worried about the date of the creation event. And there is abundant evidence that um, those organisms, for example, that we find in the fossil record, which I should stress look just as designed as the organisms living today. Many of them look exactly the same as the organisms living today. So we don't necessarily see a whole lot of evolution going on there. We do see organisms showing up and we see them disappearing, but they don't look less designed. Let's put it that way. But we also find evidence associated with them that points very, very strongly towards a recent origin. So a beautiful example is found in dinosaurs themselves. It turns out that dinosaurs now we have many papers looking at the presence of proteins that are still there in dinosaur bones and things like that. Unbelievable preservation. In fact, there was a paper that came out here in the last month or so claiming that you can actually see chromatin, DNA basically, inside cells preserved inside dinosaur cartilage that was fossilized, which is astonishing, absolutely astonishing. That one's going to be debated quite a bit, so don't take it to the bank yet. However, it's well established at this point that certainly proteins have been preserved in these dinosaur bones. This stuff is not going to last for millions of years. In fact, it's been extensively studied how long it lasts for forensic reasons, among other things. If you find a skeleton, somebody who might have been murdered or something, and you want to understand what's happened there so that you can figure out how that skeleton wound up in the jungle or something. Well, one of the things that they've looked at is the rates at which these different kinds of proteins and stuff in bones decays. And, there's just no reasonable expectation that this stuff would last for millions of years, and yet it's there. It's astonishing to me that it would last for thousands of years. So that would be, in my opinion, very strong evidence that these were created. The fossils were created recently. And the last time I checked, we've been actually keeping a list of papers, and we have over 400 peer-reviewed papers talking about not just proteins, but even nucleic acids of various kinds, and possibly most astonishing to me, unsaturated fats associated with these things. If you know anything about organic chemistry, the idea that they're going to last for thousands of years is extraordinary, let alone millions. Let alone hundreds of millions or 100 million with dinosaurs.
And perhaps another resource that I should say about that Dr. Standish is that Dr. Leonard Brand and Dr. Chadwick have co-authored a book entitled
Mm.
Science, Faith, and I think it's Earth's History or The Age of the
Yeah.
Earth, published by Andrews University Press. So I think that's a good resource
Yes,
pertaining
it's
to
faith, reason, and Earth history, and I
yeah.
should tell you, it is available for free. You can get it from, I believe you can download a free version from Amazon.com,
Yeah.
and you can also download a free version from Apple. If you go to the grisda.org website, you'll find it can be downloaded there. There are links to where it can be downloaded. So it's an excellent book. And if there's anybody there who speaks Spanish better than they speak English, we just released a Spanish version. Or else if it hasn't been released, it's coming out very soon. And it's
Okay, so
free.
it's free via Kindle app and it's free via Apple iBooks. So get it for free, and so you can study the age of the Earth, how it relates with science and how it relates with faith. So before we hear a song and we proceed with our Kahoot quiz, Dr. Standish, do you have any encouragement or words of advice for students who would like to pursue a career of science?
Well, first of all, if you're interested in science, I would highly encourage you to pursue that interest. The world is an amazing place. God created endless wonder for us in it. Obviously, there's that concern that as you go through your academic program, you may start buying into this kind of materialistic Darwinism. And so, be careful. Keep your faith strong. Stay connected with other Christians. Understand that you are not going to have an answer to every possible question in the world. Nobody does. The questions that are unanswered by Darwinism are, in my opinion, far more profound than the questions that are unanswered by ourselves. Sometimes, in my experience, it's a matter of waiting. People are working away on various things, and God will provide answers, but not 100% of the time. There'll always be something new to find out. There'll always be questions that we have for God. And maybe when Jesus comes, he'll tell us, hey, you've got eternity, so you can work on figuring out those puzzles as well. But never lose sight of the big picture, which is you are fearfully and wonderfully made. The world that God made for us to inhabit is absolutely incredible. When it was made, it was very good. Yes, it's damaged, but if you think about it this way, I think it helps. When you look at a fantastic work of art like the Venus de Milo, asking questions about the Venus de Milo's arms is pointless, because we don't have any information. We can sort of extrapolate and make suggestions and all sorts of things about them. But what we can do is we can look at the actual evidence that we have in front of us, the Venus de Milo, and recognize that that is a beautiful work of art. It was made by an artist who was a genius. Same sort of thing with the creation. So that's where I would put it. One last thing. Make sure you know what the Bible actually says before you get into arguments with people. If you haven't read through the Bible from beginning to end, that's an exercise that I really encourage you to do. It's only a matter of reading about 3 chapters a day for a year, and you'll be done before the end of the year. I've done that on a fairly regular basis over the years. It's extraordinarily useful for me because, in fact, it's helped me immensely when I've had theologians who are trying to destroy my faith. And it became evident that they were unaware of what the Bible actually says as well. So read the Bible, make sure you know what's there before you listen to too many arguments about what it does or doesn't say and those sorts of things. Look at the data, then make up your mind.
Amen. Thank you so much, Dr. Standish. We have been edified with your answers. So, friends, before we proceed with our Kahoot, I would like to read the instruction. To join the Kahoot quiz, please go to kahoot.it and type the code 2187565. And before we proceed with our Kahoot quiz, in order for you guys to win our free book, authored by Dr. Brand, let's first hear a song from Share Him Ministries.
The painter's hand is firm and never falters as he shapes the living portrait of my soul. There is wisdom in each line, his roots and altars. Where I see unfinished canvas, there the painter sees the whole. He knows the strength that grows in shadow. When I'm reaching for the light, he sees the majesty and glory beyond my mortal sight. And though I may not understand the artistry of heaven's plan, I will trust the painter's hand unceasingly. He will make a masterpiece of me. The painter's hand is gentle as he renders every stroke of living color patiently in shades of darkest night or brightest splendor. He reveals his grand design and shows me what I'm meant to be. He knows the strength that grows in shadow. When I'm reaching for the light, he sees the majesty and glory beyond my mortal sight. And though I may not understand the artistry of heaven's plan, I will trust the painter's hand restores my soul and teaches me the wonder of my brokenness and worth. He knows the strength that grows in shadow when I'm reaching for the light. He sees the majesty and glory beyond my mortal sight. And though I may not understand the artistry of heaven's plan, I will trust the page's hand that sees me. He will make a masterpiece of
All right, I'm back. So, shall we start our quiz now? Kindly invite your friends to join the Kahoot. Now, just go to your website, type in their kahoot.it, and enter the code 2187565. As of the moment, we have one player. Please invite your friends. We have, again, we have a set of 15 questions. It is a combination of biblical and scientific questions. And you have a 20-second to answer for each question. Okay, so we have two players. I can see on the screen. Go to your website, type in their kahoot.it, and type the code 2187565. So the top three winners will get this book. Yan. Entitled The Creation Relief, written by Leonard R. Brand. Okay, it is a conversation on origins. Let's wait for a few more players. Please invite your friends to join. It would be better for you to have at least two devices because you will be seeing the questions on the screen, and the other device you can use it to choose for your answer among the colored tiles. So please invite your friends. All right, we have three players now. Come on, guys. Okay, let's wait for a few more minutes. Okay, four players. Invite your friends. Again, go to the website kahoot.it and then type the code 2187565. 2187565. So the questions will be flashed on the screen. If you have only one device, I think it is possible. But it would be better if you have two devices. I guess we can start now. Okay, we have only four players. Okay, shall we start now? Others, you can still join while the game is ongoing. Okay, for the first question. What did God call the firmament? For our choices, we have the space, cosmos, cloud, or heaven. Among the tiles, please choose your answer. You can see it on your screen. You have 20 seconds to answer that. All right, the correct answer is heaven. Next, we have 5 players. True or false? God created trees on the third day of creation week. True or false? What's your answer? 10 seconds more. Okay, the correct answer is true. God created trees on the third day of creation week. Next question. What did God create the woman out of? Dust from Adam's rib, stone, or dew? What did God create the woman out of? What's your answer? Dust from Adam's rib, stone, or dew? Just click your answer among the tiles that you are seeing on your screen. Okay. Correct answer is from Adam's rib. Next question. Number 4. Who named the living creatures? Who named the living creatures? Is it God, the woman, and the man, or the woman? Click your answers. Who named the living creatures? Okay, the correct answer is the man. Next question. Number 5. Great light and the lesser light of Genesis chapter 1. The Bible and the spirit of prophecy? Is it the sun and moon? Is it the Old Testament and the New Testament? Or the moon and stars? Choose your answer. Okay, the correct answer is the sun and moon. Next question, numbers. How did God water the plants? How did God water the plants? Through the rivers, through the mist, through the rain, or through cloud seeding? Choose your answer. How did God water the plants? Is it through the river, mist, rain, or cloud seeding? All right. The correct answer is mist, through the mist. Next question. For our scoreboard, the top one here is LJ, followed by RJ, and Kyle. So this question has a power up. It is double points. So the following fossil is called. You will see a picture there. The following fossil is called ammonites, brachiopods, trilobite, or coprolite. Choose your answer. What do you call that fossil? Okay, the correct answer is trilobite. Only one player got the correct answer. Next, number 8, which of the following believes in an intelligent God? So is it Richard Dawkins, Isaac Newton, Charles Darwin, or Christopher Hitchens? Choose your answer. Which of the following believes in an intelligent creator? Okay. The correct answer is Isaac Newton. No one got the correct answer. Okay, let's proceed. Which of the following God did not create on the sixth day? Which of the following God did not create on the sixth day? Is it land animals, woman, man, or birds? Choose your answer. Okay, the correct answer is the birds. Okay. Only one player again got the correct answer. Next, let's proceed. What was the ship that Charles Darwin rode on his way to the Galapagos Island? Is it HMS Recharge, HMS Beagle, HMS Edwards, HMS Davidson? I believe our speaker mentioned this in his lecture earlier. Choose your answer. Okay, the correct answer is HMS Beagle. Again, only one player got the correct answer. For our scoreboard, we have RJ, LJ, and I guess there's an impostor trial. Okay, next question. Where in Eden did the Lord God planted the garden? Where in Eden did the Lord God planted the garden? Is it northward, eastward, southward, or westward? The correct answer is eastward. Okay. Next, question number 12. What year did Charles Darwin wrote his essay on evolution and natural selection? 1844, 1832, 1863, or 1842? What year did Charles Darwin wrote his essay on evolution and natural selection? Choose your answer. Yes, that's correct. The correct answer is 1844. The date sounds familiar, right? Okay, let's proceed. Question number 13. Which is not one of the four rivers found in Eden? Is it Hedikel, Cush, Euphrates, or Jordan? Which is not one of the four river heads found in Eden? Choose your answer. We have six answers, meaning we have six players. Okay, the correct answer is Jordan. Four players got the correct answer. Okay, second to the last question. True or false? God saw the light that it was very good. Is it the statement true or false? God saw the light that it was very good, found in Genesis 1, verse 4. Is the statement true or false? What's your answer? Okay, choose your answer. The correct answer is false. Five people answered true. The correct answer is false because the true statement is that God saw the light that it was good, not very good. Okay? Let's proceed to the last question. For our scoreboard, we have top 1 RJ, top 2 Pastor Ted Wilson is here with us. I guess he's not this one. He's not really the Pastor Ted Wilson. On the top 3 we have LJ. Okay, so for the last question, who is man? A picture will be shown on your screen. Charles Darwin, Luis Agassiz, Nicholas Copernicus, or Isaac Newton? What's your answer? Choose your answers. You have 3 answers now. Okay, the correct answer is Charles Darwin. So that's our last question. Let's see the podium. For our top 3, we have Ted Wilson. Top 2, letter Q. And the top 1, congratulations, we have RJ. So for our top 3 winners, kindly screenshot and send it to screenshot the proof and send it to the uh, page of the Behold Him Ministries, and we will be asking for your address and we will send the book to you. Thank you so much for joining. Until next time.
All right, so that ends our Bible study tonight. I hope you have enjoyed our discussion with Dr. Standish. You have enjoyed the presentation and you have enjoyed our online Kahoot quiz. And the top 3 winners will be able to receive a free copy of Dr. Brand's book on creation. So thank you so much, friends, for joining us. We hope that you will have a fruitful evening and keep looking up. Until next time, God bless you all.